For years, mouse manufacturers have been competing to dethrone the reigning kings, Logitech. The G Pro and the Superlight are some of the best-selling gaming mice ever produced, and even years after their release, companies are still trying to steal Logitech's thunder.
These are easily some of the most hyped mice to come out this year, and for pretty good reason. I mean, on paper you're getting a mouse that is better than the G Pro Superlight, newer sensor, better shape, better click feel, and actually for less money.
But the days of the Superlight's dominance might be coming to an end. Many manufacturers are stuffing their mice with new features, and they think that 4K polling rates will get you to switch to their products. But Logitech doesn't even seem to care about that. For the last little while, we've endured incremental updates to the big mice, and now a big shift is coming. Are we really entering a new era of gaming mice? Are 4K mice worth it, and can anyone actually take down Logitech? Alright, so before we dive into all the mouse talk, I must encourage you all to please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. That way you'll never miss our next episode of Cracked. It's no secret that the gaming mouse market has been pretty dry as of late, but one fairly big manufacturer has really been dragging their feet. For years, Logitech's G Pro and eventually Superlight were the gold standard of gaming mice. Logitech worked with pros to craft a safe shape that works for almost any type of player. And it worked. The Superlight is one of the most beloved, popular gaming mice ever made. But things have changed since its release back in 2021. The hardware has been surpassed as more and more companies challenge Logitech's stranglehold on the gaming world. The sensor is outdated, it still uses micro USB, and at this point, the so-called Superlight is actually heavier than many of its competitors. They may not have reached Zowie levels of complacency, but I think it's fair to say that the time has come for Logitech to release an updated version of the Superlight. And that's why the internet went nuts a few months ago when Logitech baited all of us into thinking it was finally happening, only to release a new headset. But lately, rumors of a new mouse have started to feel much more real.
Так, смотрите, с кем вот такой подгон. Unreleased Superlight 2.
Simple is a longtime Superlight user and was even one of the first players to test the original G Pro back in the day. That, combined with the fact that Navi is partnered with Logitech, made the Superlight 2's imminent release feel pretty realistic. And not long after, leaked images suggested that the new mouse would be lighter, implement a new skate design, use new switches, and a new sensor. But the alleged 2K polling rate is what really caught everyone's attention. Many consumers were disappointed to see that after all this time, the Superlight 2 didn't support higher polling rates or look all that different. To be fair, a lot of companies spent most of this year just releasing the same mice over and over again in different colors with pretty minimal changes. We saw Pulsar implement optical switches on the X2 Bruce Lee edition, Lamzu proved that they could compete with the Atlantis and Atlantis Mini, and Zowie finally added wireless to one mouse. One. Still pissed. Look, it's better late than never, I guess, but the idea is that we want innovation. Most manufacturers are just shaving weight off their existing mice. What we want is something new that really will give us an advantage in the server. And some believe that high polling rates are the answer. Over the past few months, more and more 4K and 8K options have been popping up while every peripheral junkie searches for their next endgame mouse. High polling rate mice have popped up from time to time over the past couple of years, but they've really only managed to reach the small niche market of peripheral obsessed consumers who will try just about anything. But nowadays, companies clearly want you to care about polling rates. Even so-called normie mice like the Death Adder support 4K. But does it really matter? Will a 4K mouse suddenly turn you into Demon 1? What the f is a polling rate? And how does it actually affect my gameplay? Well, you see, I actually have no idea. So I brought along my good pal, Colten.
And now, the guy who actually knows what he's talking about.
Of course you brought me along. What, Dimitri, you were gonna turn this technical mumbo-jumbo into something mildly interesting? Now, thankfully for you and I, polling rate is actually a pretty simple concept. Polling rate refers to the frequency at which your mouse sends data to your computer, measured in hertz. In a perfect world with a higher polling rate, your clicks and mouse movements should feel smoother and more responsive. But of course, this is not a perfect world. Up until very recently, 1000 Hz was pretty much the gold standard when it came to gaming mice. But in recent years, we've seen mouse manufacturers dipping their toes into 2000, 4000, and even 8000 Hz polling rates on their premium mouse offerings. So why isn't every pro just rocking a mouse with 30,000 Hz polling rate? Well, first, let's talk about the obvious. Diminishing returns. I mean, if you're gonna tell me you can feel the difference between 0.5 milliseconds at 2000 Hz and 0.25 milliseconds at 4000 Hz, then you need to call my man Professor Xavier. The second issue is a little less obvious. As it turns out, having your mouse update its position more than 1000 times a second will start to have a noticeable impact on your CPU. Enough that you will notice some impact on your frame rates, especially as you approach 8000 Hz on older hardware. In our video about the Vaxi XE wireless a few months back, we discussed the company's decision to stick to 1000 Hz polling. When it comes to esports, players competing at the highest level need to know that their equipment won't fail them on the biggest stage, so Vaxi released the XE wireless with them in mind.
Using a special simulated interference environment, our teams work together to test and make the adjustments required to meet the high standards of responsiveness and reliability required in professional gaming.
To make this simple number even more controversial, you may not even see the benefits of a higher polling rate if your DPI is below 1600. We, and by we I mean I, gave you a rundown on what DPI is in a video so old even my mustache looks younger. But let's skip right to the reason why this is. It all comes down to information. To vastly oversimplify it, you can think of a higher DPI like a higher resolution on a camera. So, a higher DPI means your mouse sensor is registering smaller movements, generating more information, and you'll see a more noticeable impact from more frequent updates. Which is why the consensus seems to be that you should aim for a comfortable DPI at or above 1600 if you're using a 4000 and especially 8000 Hz polling rate. Is the difference here small? I mean, yeah, that's why you don't see every esports pro doing this. My very non-professional opinion, anything above 1000 Hz is pretty much just personal preference. If you can afford to ball out with more expensive hardware, then go nuts. But I am a man of science, not opinions. Want us to do a comprehensive mouse settings study? I know I do. Then tell my bosses in the comments so I can show them and bend them to my science-loving will. In theory, higher polling rates should perform better, but that isn't always the case. As more mice start to implement 4000 and 8000 Hz sensors, that's definitely something you should keep in mind for your setup.
And that was the guy who actually knows what he's talking about.
So 4K is slowly becoming the norm. We've even seen some smaller manufacturers like Lamzu and Pulsar throw their names into the hat over the past couple of months, and they've been fairly well received. But is the difference between 2K and 4K really that noticeable? Like, are people just overreacting about the Superlight 2 specs? Keep in mind that the original G Pro was made to appeal to 99% of gamers, not people like Niall who want to try each and every mouse that gets released.
They're selling to a mass amount of customers. They're not selling to the niche 1% of people who want 4K. And then the other way to look at it is not everybody has, a top of the line PC that can handle 4K polling rate, right? So imagine you saw the mouse with 4K, right? And then, I don't know, you got a 15-year-old kid who has a PC their parents just bought them and it was what they could afford or whatever. And the kid starts having stutter issues and everything because he's using the mouse in 4K. And it ends up being a return.
Now, a lot of 4K mice don't only run at 4K. Sure, it might seem like a waste of money to buy a mouse capable of running high polling rates and sticking to 1000 Hz, but if it prevents your game from stuttering because your hardware simply can't handle 4K, then I think it's a pretty easy decision. 4K may seem like the next great thing in the gaming world, and honestly, it has the potential to be just that. But just because a mouse is capable of running 4000 Hz doesn't always mean that you'll have a better experience. The way that each company implements 4K can differ, and some tech reviewers have already demonstrated that not every mouse running higher polling rates is automatically better. Even Niall, who has used a lot of these products, still believes that his 1K XE wireless with Vaxi's competitive firmware feels pretty damn close to his 4K Death Adder and X2 V2. Not to mention the fact that higher polling rates are much more taxing on your CPU and the mouse's battery life. So if you're thinking about pulling the trigger on a new 4K or 8K mouse, please be sure that your computer can actually handle it first. And these are decisions that I'm sure a lot of you will have to make as 4K and 8K mice continue becoming the norm. Would you rather play on a high polling rate with a high click latency or have a smooth gaming experience?
Think about it. Every mouse coming out of China right now also has a 3395, the same switches, the same polling rate. They all have 4K, but they're being sold for like $60. So that implementation of 4K it still has higher click latency than the Logitech G Pro that came out freaking 3 years ago. I think it's all about how you implement the tech, right? I wouldn't be surprised if their 2K implementation is probably on par with a lot of 4K stuff. That's like really good at the moment.
Logitech really took their time when it came to updating the Superlight. And to be fair, they didn't really have to change it in the first place. It's still widely used by casual players and pros, despite the fact that some of the hardware is outdated. If anything, the decision probably stemmed from Logitech's competitors pushing their own technology forward and consumers just clamoring for something new. It might not be the upgrade that everyone was hoping for, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
They haven't innovated in a while, and their stuff is like a staple, right? Like the G Pro is a staple, their 305 is a staple. They redid the 303 because of Shroud and stuff like that, but they are behind their competition now in terms of specs and stuff, and they know that, right? They spend millions of dollars a year, I bet, in R&D and stuff. So will they do something to, catch up to competition, or probably even, take it a step further? I think they will. I wouldn't be surprised, like I said, if Logitech comes out with a software update or something to support a much higher polling rate.
After a somewhat slow start to the year, the mouse war is starting to heat up again. Plenty of brands have dropped new products over the past few months, and with a new Superlight on the horizon, there's a lot to be excited about. Are high polling rate features necessarily for you? That's for you to decide. But if the Superlight 2 somehow flops, maybe Logitech's reign will finally come to an end. I pay no mind to it. I don't care about the Logitech Superlight, not because I think it's a bad mouse, but because since the day the G Pro came out, it has been too small for me. It is a tiny little mouse that they refuse to make a larger size of, and so I just don't care.